called the scrotum. Now, a lot of you guys already know what I'm talking about. And really, all the scrotum is it's a very thin sac of tissue. And inside the scrotum, it holds both of the testes. All right, now I'll talk about testes later. But the scrotum's main job is not protection. Guys, help me out with this. The scrotum is not helping to protect anything. We've fallen on our bike seats. We've fallen on our keys. We've been hit there. We've been kicked there. We've been all those different things, and the scrotum has not protected us one time. All right, so it's not a protection thing. All right, what the scrotum's job is it's to regulate the temperature of the testes. All right, the testes need to be around 96 degrees or so for optimum sperm cell production. All right, so that's why they're on the outside of the body and not on the inside of the body like all the female parts are. Okay, so what the scrotum does is that if it registers that it's getting too cold outside or the testes temperature is starting to drop too much, what it will do is it will tighten up and it'll pull the testes into the body cavity more. All right, now guys, you know what it's like when you get into a cold pool. Everything disappears. It's like a scared turtle. It just sucks right in. And that's all it's trying to do, is it's trying to keep those testes at the optimum sperm cell production temperature of around 96 degrees or so. Now, opposite. You're out in 90-degree weather with 100% humidity. It's smoking hot outside, all right? And we'll notice that the scrotum will relax a ton and hang way far away from the body, trying to get those testes as far away from the body as it can to try to maintain that 96 degrees. It doesn't want to go higher than that as our body temperature fluctuates. All right, and so that's why we'll start to see it hangs a lot further and sometimes it gets a little uncomfortable and all that kind of stuff. But that's what's happening. And that scrotum is moving around. It's trying to maintain the temperature of those testes. So that's its main job, is temperature regulation. The testes. Now, we've already talked a little bit about the scrotum and the testes, the relationship between the two. That the scrotum basically houses the testes. But what do the testes do? The testes have a couple different jobs. One, they're the male reproductive organ. All right. This is where the sex cell comes from. This is where the DNA is transferred into the sperm cell. This is where it's created. All right. Now, guys, we create sperm cells our entire lives. Once we hit puberty, I don't know, anywhere between 10 and 12 years old, all the way until we die, we're going to be producing sperm cells. And we produce around 50,000 a minute in each one. So we produce a ton of them. All right. And basically what we see in the testes itself is it's basically made up of a whole network of little tubes. All right. And they call them seminiferous tubules. And those things just kind of intersect or wrap around and interweave through the whole testy. And then all these cells are made. All right. Now, a lot of people get confused and think that semen is created in the testes. But this is completely false. It's not where semen is. It's just densely packed cells. All right. Let me give you a little graphic here. All right, now this is what we commonly refer to as a sperm cell. Okay, now the sperm cell itself is made up of three different parts. We have the head, we have the body, and then we have the tail. All right, the tail simply propels the sperm cell forward. The body is basically the motor that drives the tail, and the head, this is where all the genetic material is actually located. All right, and this sperm cell, this part right here, is what's being created in the testes, and this is where all the DNA is, the genetic makeup that dad is going to contribute to any kids. All right, this is what's being made in the testes, is the actual sperm cell where the DNA and all that stuff is at. And one more job of the testes. The first one is to produce sperm cells, but the second job of the testes is to produce a hormone called testosterone. And what testosterone is it's kind of produces the secondary male sexual characteristics. Now, the main responsibility of testosterone is to produce sperm cells. It's the main hormone that creates that function. But the second role of testosterone is the secondary male characteristics. And this is going to be all the masculine traits that men typically have associated with them. Deeper voice, coarser body hair, coarse facial hair, some of the aggression, some of the sex drive, some of those kinds of things. That's all responsible because of testosterone. Now, this is also part of the reason why boys sometimes do the dumb things that they do, is because they have testosterone in their system, and it ebbs and flows, especially during puberty. It ebbs and flows, and the higher the testosterone levels, typically, the higher the sex drive, the higher the aggression is. And so that's why guys sometimes do some of the dumb things that they do, or say some of the dumb things that they say, is not because they necessarily, really think that, but it's almost like, I don't want to say they can't help it, but it's almost like they have a tendency towards that because of these high levels of hormones. Now, guys, don't take that as saying, well, I have an excuse to be an immature jerk because I have testosterone in my system. We can control that. Our brain, our amygdala, remember that, the amygdala versus the prefrontal cortex. Our amygdala is primarily responsible for the creation of testosterone and regulating testosterone, which means that if we get the other part of our brain, the prefrontal cortex, our ability to think rationally, our ability to think logically, our ability to look at consequences, that part of our brain can be strengthened, and that can override the craziness that testosterone will put into our bloodstream and make us think or do crazy things. So we can choose to behave normally even though we have testosterone in our systems. But that's also a reason why men have those kind of traits, those masculine traits, and there's a good reason to have them, but we have to control them, and we have the ability to control them. But in a sense, ladies, if you want to know the answer to why men are such pervs, it's because of testosterone. Next up is what we call the epididymis. All right. Now we just learned in the last graphic the difference between the sperm cell, where the genetic material is, and the rest of the sperm cell that we could typically refer to. It looks like a tadpole. All right. The epididymis' primary job is a storage tank. It's where all these sperm cells basically what they call mature. All right. What that means is they get that the body and the tail put on. I'm going to go back to that graphic. All right. So in the epididymis, this is what's basically being created: the body and the tail. Okay. If you remember correctly, the genetic material is here. This is made in the testes. Okay. The rest of this entire cell is being created in what's called the epididymis. All right. And that's located just on the outer side of each testis. And it's basically a real fleshy kind of consistency. It's not very big, but it does hold a dense, packed group of cells so that it can basically put that body and tail on. All right, that's the job of the epididymis, storage tank. The urethra is shared in the male system. It means it's used for two different things. Okay, one is it's used to expel urine, and two, it's used to expel semen that's got the sperm cells in it for the genetic pass on to the female. What the vas deferens does is it takes all these stored up sperm cells that have been kind of being worked on, getting the body and tail on. It's almost equivalent to like a car manufacturer, where it goes right down the line and things get added to it. And that's pretty much what's happening in the epididymis. And so what happens then is that when sexual stimulation occurs, so all these cells that are inside the epididymis are going to travel up the vas deferens, and they're going to stop right here at this point right there. All right, there's little muscles or whatever that close off to keep any of the sperm cells from escaping too early. Now, typically in the vas deferens, there are no sperm cells present, or there's very few. All right, all of them are located down here in the epididymis. Okay, they travel through the vas deferens only when a certain series of events happens. All right, so that's going to be important to remember as we move through the rest of this system. All right, simply put, the vas deferens is a tube that carries sperm cells from the epididymis all the way to the urethra. The penis, which a lot of people would associate with being the primary, most important part of the male reproductive system. It's actually not true. The most important part of the male reproductive system is actually the testes, because this is where the genetic material is at. This is where the hormones are created. This is where all those things happen, is inside the testes themselves. The penis simply is the way that we deliver the genetic material from dad to mom. That's pretty much all its function really is to deliver that. Okay. Now, inside the penis, there's a bunch of different, you can kind of see these little blocky areas here, and those are all different pieces of what's called erectile tissue. And this is where we get the term erection from. Now, it's a real spongy group. Spongy group of tissues. And what happens is that during sexual arousal or during a high point of hormone release, those blood vessels inside that erectile tissue are going to swell and open up. And what that does is it allows more blood to flow through them. All right. Now, a lot of people think that blood flows in them and then it hangs onto the blood, and that's not true. What happens is that those blood vessels open up wide, and it causes what we know as an erection. All right. So what happens is that the penis becomes erect and stiff, and it's because all this blood is flowing through that area of the body. All right, and then that's what gives the male an erection, and it basically puts it in a better position to be able to deliver the sperm cells into the female. All right, but it is based on blood. It's based on the blood that's traveling through the penis at the time to make it erect. Now, when that occurs, every time that occurs, there's a couple things that happen. All right, now remember before when I talked about the vas deferens, every time a guy gets an erection, that signals the sperm cells that are stored inside the epididymis to travel through the vas deferens, and then it hangs on. It doesn't necessarily automatically go into the urethra, because a guy will get anywhere between 8 to 12 erections a day. Can you believe that? 8 to 12. Now, I know some of you are in there like, okay, most of them happen in your sleep, all right? Some people think that's to help you keep from rolling out of bed. I don't know if that's true or not. But most of them happen in your sleep, anywhere from 8 to 12 erections. Now, if we ejaculate every time we get an erection, that's a big problem. So just because a guy gets an erection doesn't mean that he's going to ejaculate. But the body is going to prepare for that. And that's why all those sperm cells will travel from the epididymis through the vas deferens and then wait to see if ejaculation is needed or not. So then a question comes in, well, what happens then with all the sperm cells that go into the vas deferens if ejaculation doesn't take place? Okay, do they go back to the epididymis? No. Remember, we're producing 50,000 sperm cells a minute inside the testes. We don't have any room for any callbacks. All right. So simply what happens is all the sperm cells that pack their way into that vas deferens simply die off, and the body basically reabsorbs them. And then we basically get ready for, the next time there's the chance that we might be passing our genetic material on to somebody. And so that's a constant thing that's going on. About every 48 hours, our body is going to restore the sperm cells in the epididymis. So even if an erection, for whatever reason, doesn't take place within 48 hours, all the sperm cells that are in the epididymis are going to die off, get reabsorbed, and make room for brand new ones, because our body's going to try to create the best possible sperm cells for every opportunity that's available to be able to spread or pass on the genetic material for our offspring. All right. So the penis is the delivery model to be able to get the sperm cells to the female, and the erectile tissue is what causes the erection, and that also stimulates the vas deferens to release the sperm cells so that it's ready to go. So we've explained the mechanics of what causes the erection, but now let's talk a little bit about chemicals in terms of what I guess stimulates the erectile tissue to open up. Okay, well there's basically a couple things. One, it has to do with stimulation in terms of mental, visual stimulation. Men are very visual people. We see something, we're attracted to it. We see a girl that's attractive. We see an image that's attractive. That can stimulate a release of testosterone. That can stimulate the erectile tissue to open up and cause that erection. Sometimes guys can get erection for no reason at all. Again, we have 8 to 12. Most of them happen in our sleep. Does that mean we're thinking about or dreaming about sex things? No, not the case whatsoever. The other thing that creates those erectile tissues to open up is a release of testosterone. Our testosterone levels spike, okay? Because hormones go up and down, they ebb and flow. All of our hormones do that. Testosterone is no different. And when those hormone levels, that testosterone spikes, it stimulates that erectile tissue to open up, and an erection happens as a result. So you could have a guy that's sitting in, I don't know, math class, and he's not thinking anything about anything, and all of a sudden he realizes, hey, what's going on? All right, it doesn't mean he really likes math. Okay, all that happened was he probably had a spike in testosterone. It caused those erectile tissues to open up, and he wound up getting an erection. No big deal. Doesn't mean he's a perv. Doesn't mean he's thinking about sexual thoughts. Doesn't mean he really likes math. It just means that his hormone levels did something, and it caused his body to react. Now, part of that too is it's a way for the body to clean out what's in the epididymis, and that way it makes room for more sperm cells as they're being created in the testes. So it's a way to get rid of the old and bring in the new in terms of the epididymis as well. So guys, don't freak out if you just get an erection for no reason. It's perfectly normal. It's the way that your body works. Now that doesn't mean you walk around and be proud of it, but at the same time, it is normal. Sometimes when guys get super relaxed, right, and that's why a lot of times in the mornings, fellas, you know what I'm talking about, we'll notice that you might wake up with an erection. A lot of times that has to do with the fact you're just really relaxed, and for some reason, I don't know if that releases the testosterone or if it has something to do with erectile tissue, but relaxation seems to bring erections on as well. So there's a lot of different elements that go into what stimulates the erectile tissue to open up in the first place. The most common would be some kind of visual stimulation or some kind of mental imagery, something we're thinking about that basically gets us aroused physically is the most common. So. The CalPERS gland. It's real tough to see. It's a real small little gland right here. Okay. Now, we talked about before when a male gets an erection, the sperm cells travel from the epididymis all the way up and around the vas deferens. Okay. Now, there's another thing that's signaled every time a guy gets an erection, and that's the CalPERS gland releases its fluid. It's a very small, tiny gland, doesn't release a whole lot, but because urine travels from the bladder through the urethra, and semen also, or sperm cells also travel through there, it's a very acidic environment. And so what needs to happen is that this little gland is going to secrete a very clear, oily type of fluid right when a guy has an erection, every time he has an erection, and that's called pre-ejaculatory fluid. Now, what that does is it coats the urethra so that it protects the sperm cells from the walls, the acidic walls of the urethra, because there's all kinds of stuff in there. And so this ensures that the sperm cells are going to be able to travel through that urethra without picking up all that acidity and then dying off quickly. And so that's what the CalPERS gland's job is to lubricate and to protect the sperm cells from the acidic environment in the penis. Now, guys will notice if they get an erection, sometimes they'll have a couple drops of this real clear, real oily type of a liquid. And that's from the CalPERS gland. It's the pre-ejaculatory fluid. It's perfectly normal. It's supposed to happen. Can sperm cells travel through that? Yeah, there are some sperm cells that are going to be kind of hanging out in the vas deferens. Not a ton, but sometimes there are some that kind of are stragglers and hang back, and they can travel through that CalPERS gland fluid, but it's not really a ton. Some people could say, well, you can get pregnant from it. I'm not going to say you can't, but it's a very unlikely scenario necessarily that pregnancy is going to happen solely from the pre-ejaculatory fluid. Although anytime there's sperm cells present, a pregnancy can take place. All right, but that's what that little fluid is. Every time a guy gets an erection, the vas deferens fills up with sperm cells. The CalPERS gland releases its fluid. It's ready to go. It's basically preparing itself to pass on those sperm cells onto the female. All right, we have two glands here. We have the prostate gland, and we have what's called the seminal vesicle. All right. Now, these two glands are what produces the fluid that sperm cells travel in. All right, it's the fluid that we call semen or seminal fluid. Now, if you'll notice, the prostate gland is right here. It's about the size of a walnut, and it literally, this is a cross-section picture here, but literally the prostate gland is shaped like a donut. It means that there's a hole right through the middle of it, and that's the urethra passes right through the middle of that hole. All right. The seminal vesicle is located just off the side of the vas deferens. It's a big fleshy gland right over here. All right. Now the combination of these two fluids is what produces that seminal fluid. It's the fluid for sperm cells to move through. It's also a fluid that basically provides nourishment for the sperm cells so that they're able to have energy to move. All right. Now, if you'll notice, those glands are not located down here where the testes are. And we talked about this earlier, that inside the testes is just simply the sperm cells itself. There's no fluid in there, right? All the fluid is created by these two glands, okay? So here's what happens. The guy gets an erection, okay? The erectile tissue opens up, blood flows through it. That signals the sperm cells to travel through the vas deferens. It also signals the CalPERS gland to release its fluid to coat the urethra in the event that ejaculation is going to take place. All right, now, let's say ejaculation is going to take place, okay? What happens is muscular contractions occur inside the penis, right? And it basically pulls that fluid out of the seminal vesicle and the prostate gland, okay? So the seminal vesicle secretes its fluid. The prostate gland secretes its fluid. The sperm cells open up here and flow into the urethra. So the seminal vesicle, the prostate gland, and the sperm cells all mix together inside the urethra at the same time, and then they get ejaculated out of the body. All right. Now, someone will ask, well, how much fluid is there in seminal fluid? Well, there's a wide array of I guess, volume that people can secrete in a single ejaculation. But on average, it's about anywhere between 5 to 10 cc's of fluid. Okay, that's anywhere between 5 to 10 milliliters, or roughly a tablespoon or more. Okay, now I've got here a little syringe here. This is a 5 milliliter syringe. All right, so what I'm going to do is fill it up. Okay, just for demonstration purposes, right there, this is about 2 milliliters of fluid. All right, so it's right in the middle between, well, it's almost a 5. There's 5 milliliters of fluid. Okay, now this is about average, which means that some people have a lot less, and that's why I fill it up to 2. Some people have 5. Some people may have more. But on average, you're looking at about 5 milliliters. It's not a whole lot of fluid. Okay, even if I were to go down to 1 milliliter, which is possible, right there. Okay, and it all depends on how much fluid the prostate and the seminal vesicle are secreting. Now, how many sperm cells are present inside this much seminal fluid? This is 1 cc. Okay, 1 cc or 1 milliliter of seminal fluid. The amount of sperm cells that are present in this 1 milliliter, 1 cc amount of fluid is up to 700 million. Did you hear that? 700 million sperm cells are in this amount of fluid right here. Okay, now it's up to that. Maybe there's not as many. It's anywhere between 500 million to 700 million is the range or the average. Okay, now even if we take half of that, half the 700 million would be 350 million. That's still a lot of sperm cells in a very small amount of fluid. All right, this makes it a very efficient system to be able to fertilize an egg thus passing on our genetic material to the next generation. All right. So that's what's happening with those different glands, the seminal vesicle and the prostate gland. They secrete the fluids. We don't build up and store fluids anywhere. A lot of people have this idea that somehow all these fluids build up inside the testes and the testes are going to swell up and get real big. That's not the case whatsoever. All we have in the testes is cells. The seminal fluid is produced from the seminal vesicle and the prostate gland. It only releases its fluid during ejaculation, and basically we're mixing those three fluids with the sperm cells right where the vas deferens and the urethra meet.